everything you click on, every algorithm, every ad is meant to make you feel awful. It's meant to tickle a vulnerability, to start like stoking that vulnerability until you become convinced that you need a product or a procedure, something expensive that can fix it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Doug Barr, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the St. Helena Forum for Innovation and Creativity. The Forum, as many of you know, is an educational nonprofit with a mission to entertain, inform, and inspire by presenting a broad mix of humanities-based programming. Before we begin our discussion today, let me ask you a question. Have you ever had a friend obsessed with their appearance? It could be a girl or a boy or a man or a woman, but based upon numerous studies, the likelihood is that your friend will be female and not alone in her obsession. A recent World Health Organization survey of 200,000 young people in 42 different countries found that simply being a girl was a better predictor of whether a young person felt too fat despite their actual body size. And 50% of women have an overall negative evaluation of their own bodies, and 34% of 5-year-old girls, 5-year-olds, say they engage in deliberate dietary restraint. So many accomplished, bright, talented, and otherwise confident girls and women of all ages crumble when they look into a mirror. And what they're feeling, according to our guest, Dr. Renee Engeln, is called beauty sick, an affliction perpetrated by a worldwide culture that teaches girls that the most important thing they can be is beautiful, and then pummels them with a standard of beauty that's impossible to achieve. Dr. Engeln has been an award-winning professor for 15 years at Northwestern University, where she teaches about psychopathology, the psychology of women and gender, social psychology, and the psychology of human beauty. She also directs the Body and Media Lab, which conducts research exploring issues surrounding women's body images. She earned her BS in psychology at the University of Illinois, her master's in clinical psychology at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and her PhD in social psychology at Loyola University, Chicago. Renee's work has appeared in numerous academic journals and at academic conferences. She's regularly interviewed by the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, Today.com, the Huffington Post, Think Progress, and lots of other national media. Renee will be in conversation today with Michele Mitchell. In addition to being a member of the St. Helena Forum's Board of Directors, Michele is a filmmaker, a journalist, and an author, best known for her on-camera reporting for PBS and CNN Headline News, and her documentaries, Haiti, Where Did the Money Go?, and The Uncondemned. Michele left Headline News after her second novel was published, but returned to television on Now with Bill Moyers on PBS. She has received Gracie Awards and an honorable citation from the Overseas Press Awards for her coverage of Nepalese girls sold into indentured servitude. And now, please welcome Dr. Renee Engeln and Michele Mitchell.
Oh, okay, I'm going to just jump right in. So, since we are recording this, we're having this conversation right after the Super Bowl. So, your book was published in 2017, right?
Yeah, it feels like so long ago now.
Well, something else happened in 2017. That was the last time that Carl's Jr. ran the bikini and hamburger ad for the Super Bowl until yesterday. They brought it back, and I was reading some of the comments on YouTube, which include, "We're so back. Thanks, Carl's Jr." And also, "It feels like the 90s again. The world is healing."
Who knew that a sexualized woman in a bikini eating a hamburger could heal the world? I mean, if that were true, we would have been so healed by now.
I was so curious to find out like what you thought of that, because I, first of all, hadn't noticed that they hadn't run it, but the fact that they brought it back in 2025, what does that indicate to you as an academic and as an observer of the, I don't want to call it the beauty myth, but
I mean, we have to be careful throwing around words like backlash, but I'm ready to go there a little, right? And
careful.
So the way we think about women shows up in our media imagery. Like, so there's no question that that's true. And one way to sort of keep women in line, to keep them from agitating for too much power, is to keep them sexualized, is to keep them focused on how they look, is to make them feel more like things and less like complete human beings. And of course, there's nothing wrong with wearing a bikini. People can wear a bikini, but those commercials, they're not just a woman in a bikini, right? They're absurd, right? They're an extraordinarily thin woman in a bikini eating a giant hamburger, right? They're a woman wearing a bikini in a context where women don't wear bikinis. Like, this is not what women do in bathing suits. Last time I checked. So that whole ad is meant to cater to a particular view of women that says you're a thing, right? You're here to be visually pleasing to me. Mm-hmm. You're not a complete human being. I don't care what you think. I don't care what you feel. You're just there to be pleasing to the eye.
So you said something really well. All of that was really interesting, but particularly intriguing to me is the fact that you made the correlation between taking away actual power. And I would love to talk a little bit about what women politicians, women in power, what they look like now, because I have to tell you, when I see Kristi Noem, cosplaying a law enforcement official, and but I mean, I've hung out with a lot of law enforcement officials. I haven't seen any of them wear that much makeup, right? But that's a real look. I mean, this is a person who ostensibly has a lot of power, right? She's a former governor as well. She knows how to do all this. I mean, the look has changed.
One of the questions I get whenever I talk about my research is, why aren't you focusing on men? Why aren't you focusing on men? And I always have this like somewhat canned response I give, which is that men, of course, have to worry about how they look too. Some men have pretty significant concerns about body image. Men can have eating disorders, but men and women live in systematically different social worlds when it comes to appearance. And one of the main ways that plays out is that men are able to trade competence for looks, or trade power for looks. So if a man is powerful enough, if he's effective enough, if he's wealthy enough, we don't really care that much how he looks, right? We can let some of that go. But what you see is that when you study women with political or social or economic power, they don't get to let it go, right? They don't get to make that trade. They still have to follow the same rules. They still have to, spend much more time, much more money, much more energy on their appearance than a man in a similar position would. So it is an issue of gender equity, but I think you're pointing to something else, right? Which is, what does it mean when you are dressed as a law enforcement officer, but also like a model, right? What is that saying about who women are, who law enforcement officers are? I think what it's saying is that there's a certain segment of our population that will only be comfortable with women in roles of power if they appear hyper feminine. Because that sort of hyper feminine appearance is a way of still communicating, don't worry, I'm not too much.
Interesting. Well, the reflection you just saw was me thinking about a friend of mine who was the first woman FBI agent on a SWAT team. And she's very attractive, but I'm telling you right now, she terrified my ex-husband, who has "Live Free" tattooed on his knuckles. Like, when he met her, he's like, "Oh, whoa, she could kick my ass," because she just, there's a presence, right? But, something else that happened recently, which there has been a lot of discussion about this online. The Grammys, Kanye West and his wife on the red carpet. I'm assuming that you saw the
I did. I wish I knew less about popular media, but it seeps in sometimes.
Obviously it was a stunt, right? We know it was a stunt because no one would talk about this guy otherwise, because frankly, he hasn't actually done a lot to talk about other than have his wife standing next to him, essentially naked, in New York City, which, by the way, yes, this will still stop traffic in New York City. We're not so jaded as New Yorkers. It's, A lot of people found those photographs disturbing, and I'm really curious what your take is.
I mean, there's a lot going on to that image, right? Like, yes, so we find, women's nudity disturbing unless we want it, right? And then we find it very welcome. And so I think what we really find disturbing is when we don't feel like we're in control of women's bodies. And so the question is, who was in control there? I heard a lot of narratives saying, Kanye West dressed her. And I thought that's such interesting language, like a doll, like a child. He dressed her. But presumably she's also an autonomous adult who can make decisions about her wardrobe. And I think what we're seeing is that if you have a woman whose primary source of power is in her body and in the sexualization of her body, she's going to use that power. Why wouldn't she use that power if she feels like it's all she has? I think a lot of women in various ways find themselves in similar positions, even if it doesn't result in them being, nearly naked on a red carpet, where they feel like they need to use their bodies in the way they can to make it. I think it's more complex.
He was fully clothed standing
Oh,
up.
yes.
That
Yeah.
was the thing that was so beyond creepy,
Right.
because if she's an autonomous adult, I guess I'm not asking you to get inside her brain, but what does it say about us as women that we were like, oh, this is so empowering for me to stand next to my fully clothed husband while I'm naked on a really public venue?
I really question this idea that power comes from being cold and uncomfortable. Like whoever decided that, I really have a bone to pick with that. Something my lab's have been looking into a lot recently is women's clothing. And it actually started a while ago. I wrote an op-ed with a student about how women's clothes are more uncomfortable than men's clothes. And the editor said, well, do you have any evidence for that? And I thought, well, the world, but I thought, no, I'm an empiricist. That's a good question, right? What evidence do we have? And so we actually just started collecting data on this, on what we call it painful, distracting, or restricting clothing. So it can literally hurt you, or it's just distracting because you have to fuss with it, or it makes it so you can't move, you can't breathe, you can't run away when you need to. And not surprisingly, women are much more likely to wear this kind of clothing. Everything from shoes that pinch and cause blisters to clothes that literally keep you from being able to take a deep breath. That's a big deal when your clothes are keeping you from being able to breathe. So if we think about that outfit on the red carpet, that was not an outfit meant to sit in, to stand in, to move in, to breathe in, right? That outfit is part of making yourself into a thing for other people. Whether you mean it that way or not. Now, women can choose to wear whatever they want, but we have to ask what's going on in our culture that when you appear on the red carpet, we're supposed to look good, that a man gets to cover his body and be comfortable out in the cold, and a woman might as well not wear clothing at all, right? What does that say about us, about what we value, and about who has real power? I think we kid ourselves when we talk about women's ability to attract attention via nakedness as power. That's not power.
No,
yeah,
absolutely. Just so we're yeah. And by the way, to go back to something you said earlier, where you said that it's men, can compensate for a lack of being physically attractive with money. I am so judgy that I actually would say, no, I'm sorry, dude, if you have a lot of money, it still does not excuse not keeping yourself in shape. I'm sorry.
No, I don't like that kind of language. I'll be honest, I don't think we owe a certain shape to the world.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't think women do, and I don't think men do either. Yeah. But the issue is women live in that world more than men do, right? When the letting herself go trope, right? That means something a little different for women. It's a bigger, more pernicious idea when it comes to women. For men, it means get a haircut, take a shower, exercise once in a while. But for women, it means don't age, keep your skin perfect, never let yourself go gray, always stay thin, look like a 20-year-old for the rest of your life, somehow, magically, right? But do all of that while it looks like you're not doing anything at all. Right? Make it look like it's easy. Make it look like it's natural. That's a ridiculous set of requirements for any human being to live under.
Well, to go back to the shoes for a hot second,
Yeah,
what's
let's.
fascinating, during COVID, I couldn't wear my heels, right? And we weren't
Mhm.
going anywhere. And I really do love heels. Love them a lot, but I can't wear
Yeah.
them now because I'm old and things hurt. But I
Mhm.
was trying to figure out, like, how is it that heels were something guys wore? And then way back in the day, I mean, we're talking centuries ago, but they
Right.
obviously figured out they weren't comfortable and we got stuck with them.
Well, I will say the heels that men wore were not like the heels
That's
women wore
true.
today either. They were sort of glorified lifts that came from really more of the idea that tall men were seen as more powerful. Heels for women are different. Like any shoe, this is one of my students put it this way, I love it. She's like, heels are shoes that do a terrible job at being shoes, right? They do a terrible job.
It's so true.
You can't. And I had a woman who emailed me. She got very mad at an op-ed I wrote about this, and she said, "I run just fine in my heels. Thank you very much." And I thought, well, that is patently false, right? You can't run in heels,
Do
right?
you remember that scene in Jurassic Park where the actress is she's actually racing away from the dinosaur, a T-Rex,
Mhm.
in her
In
heels?
heels, yeah,
I was like,
in
I'm walking out
heels.
of the movie theater.
I mean, it's it sounds like, of course, some people like heels, and I'm like you. When I was young, I wore heels sometimes. I loved feeling tall, and I also, like you, do not and cannot anymore. I put a lot more emphasis on comfort now, both out of necessity and choice. But why do we like heels, right? We like heels because they make us feel attractive and powerful. But why, right? Anytime that women are doing something that men aren't asked to do, and the thing women do, excuse me, costs money and hurts and makes you less safe, I
Mhm.
have some real questions about that. Like, why is it that they feel good to us? Um, we would never ask men to wear shoes like that,
No. No,
period.
absolutely not. And
Right?
also, like, you have this great anecdote. You have so many great anecdotes in your book, but one that made me laugh out loud is the cargo pants. I too like cargo pants. They're
Love cargo pants. I got some cargo sweatpants this year. That's
oh,
like
it's done.
even better. Even better. I can put so many things in those pockets. Yeah, I don't know. Now the 90s may be coming back in style. I'm not really sure. I love to see it, but yeah, I think about so for people who don't know, the anecdote was a colleague of mine who I respect very much. Saw that I like gotten some cargo pants, and he said, "Oh, I just don't think women should wear those. Right? They don't look good. They don't look good in them. Women shouldn't wear them." And I just think about that all the time. Like my job is not to look good for random people. Like there are some women that is their job, right? They're some sort of public facing job. They're an actress, they're a model, maybe they're a news anchor. And part of the job we understand is to look a certain way. But for most of us, it's not our job. It just feels like it is. And it shouldn't.
I was just thinking that definitely you're a professor at Northwestern. I went to journalism school there. That colleague of yours, 100% was not teaching war correspondence
Right.
because that's what we wear.
Yeah.
And we're not wearing
It's
heels
amazing.
either, by the way.
No.
For sure.
No, no.
Or never wore heels in the field. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm maybe making too big a deal out of the shoes, but I think these are shoes that make it so that someone could literally knock you over just like that.
oh,
If you weren't,
100%. I
you
just,
can't run, you can't stand. And the other part that we don't think about enough is that it is very distracting when your clothing hurts. It is
Mhm.
very, very distracting. And I have people say, well, I can focus on what I'm doing and have my feet hurt. And I think, great, awesome for you. Wouldn't it be better if you didn't have to, right? Wouldn't it be better to be fully present and not having to be thinking about the fact that you can't take a deep breath in your Spanx? Like that's a real trade-off we need to think about.
So you were talking about how we have this pressure to not age. And I am fascinated by what's going on with even younger people right now.
Mhm.
And I point you to, and I'm sure you've been asked about this, the phenomenon of drunk elephant. And
Yes.
if you do a hashtag Sephora Kids, there's an entire TikTok
Mhm.
genre dedicated to Sephora employees going, why are there 8-year-olds
Right.
buying $55 eye cream? And why, and they're buying products with retinol and vitamin C. You're not supposed to use retinol until you're in your mid 20s. Um, what is going on with that?
I have so many things to say about that. We've actually started a research project on this topic where we're trying to
Great.
figure out how much of this is really happening, right? Is this just a series of headlines? The whole Gen Z is aging like milk. I don't know if you saw that headline. Um, is this really happening, or is it a few people on TikTok and it makes it
Yeah.
seem bigger? I mean, I haven't published this yet, but we have some initial data, and it's very early, but a teaser is that we surveyed 18 to 24-year-old women, and in our first sample, 8% of them said they'd already done Botox. So that's a pretty big number, right? So what I want to know is what is happening culturally that makes girls terrified of getting older, right? What is it that we see in middle-aged women that is so horrifying, right? What is it that you fear you will lose? What is it that you might gain that you're not even considering that makes you feel like you need to look like a child forever, or at least have the skin of a child? And I think many of these young girls buying these products, they don't know anything about wrinkles. They don't know anything about this. But what they know is that this is what women do. And when you're little, you want to, you want to be more grown up. And somebody taught them that. And so who taught them that being a girl, being a woman means spending every cent you have on products, most of which, by the way, will not change the way you look at
Right.
all, right? That it means spending hours in Sephora, and that it means looking in the mirror, looking in the mirror, looking in the mirror. We have other things to do. Like, it's normal to look in the mirror. Everything does it. But I think this is a toxic part of our culture that we should question. And when I have reporters ask me, like, why are all these 8 to 10-year-olds buying Sephora products? I think, they don't have jobs. Who's giving them this money? Right?
Yeah.
This isn't happening out of nowhere. Someone okayed this.
Well, that's what the Sephora employees, God bless them for saying, like, who's the parent here? Like, why are you letting your child buy $900 of skincare products? And also, to the point of it being unrealistic, if one more celebrity who clearly has access to mega plastic surgery says, oh, I just put olive oil on my skin and drink a lot of water and look like this, liar. It's not true. If you are watching this, okay.
No, the beauty trick is money. And the second beauty trick is time. Right? And to say anything else is false. It's a lie. And the more honest we can be about that, I think the better off we'll be. And this isn't just an issue of gender equity. It's about class too. Because what we're doing is creating a class of women who have the money and they have the time and the access to treat their face, to treat their body like ongoing art projects that need constant work and constant remodeling. And then they can sort of set the standard that says, this is what people look like at this age. I was at a talk the other day, and I was saying how I block on social media real fast. I don't do a lot of social media, but the minute something or someone I follow sends something out that I don't like for any reason, I'm just like, that's it, right? That's part of how I try to keep myself healthy. And I had a friend who, for context, I'm about to turn 49. So I have a friend who posted something, and it said, this is 50. And it was a close up of her face, and it was completely edited. There was nothing, right? Just absolutely nothing on that face that looked like 50. And the language around it bothered me so much. I think we need to be really careful about that. That's not 50, right? And 50 is actually okay. I've told people I've started, I think they find it very weird. I tell in my classes how old I am. when
Mhm.
I'm teaching. Like I just kind of like sneak it in, like in the introduction. I've been at Northwestern for 19 years. I turned 49 this year, and I try to just kind of put it out there because obviously something is going on that's making young women think that the worst thing that could happen to them is that they could get older. And the alternative is actually not great.
Well, to your point, I'm really happy to tell people I'm 54. And there's a Michele Mitchell who's a professor at Northwestern. So if you Google me, her age comes up, not mine. And she's older. She's in her 60s,
Okay.
I would say. I have not asked Google to change that because I think this is great. If people are like, you look amazing for 63, I'm like, yes, I do. But when people say, well, you don't look 54, I'm like, I don't have kids. So guess what? I get sleep. So that's the other thing.
See, when people say that to me, they go, "What does that mean? What does that mean? And why?
I don't know.
Why?"
And I was so happy to turn
Yeah,
50 because it occurred to me. I was like, now you have to take me seriously. I'm in my
I
50s.
know. I
So
have that idea about gray hair. So I don't think you can see it on this camera, but I'm getting gray hair now, and I'm really excited. And I said that to a student. They said, "Why? Why would you be excited?" And I'm like, "I'm going to get so much respect now
I,
between that, and I need glasses now. I'm going to
I
be
know you
so.
know
I'll
actually
let you know."
because so
Yeah.
actually so I do get Botox and but I didn't get it until I was your age.
I,
I waited a while,
you didn't
but
wait until you were 24.
at the 24, at least I was using sunblock. That was actually I remember asking a woman who, in her 50s. I said, your skin looks great. I was 25 ish. And she said, she's from the South. And she said that she followed the beauty instructions of her aunt who said, no sun, no soap. And that's kind of got in my head was like, always wear sunblock. But, I'm also from Southern California originally. Like skin cancer is a real thing. But to the point of social media, one of the things that I bring up, I get Botox because I went in and I forever was like grilling the plastic surgeon who did it. I was like, don't make me look like Madonna. I really, like, I've got a lot of concerns. And he's like, you're not going to look like Madonna. That's a lot of other things. So I love asking him, like, what do people come in for? And he told me the last time I was there, this number one thing that is happening to him is that younger people are coming in and they have a picture of themselves that's been filtered, like your friend, this is 50, and that they're like, make me look like this.
Yeah.
And he's like, I can't.
That's not a human being. It's not you. It's not anyone. Like when I first started doing work on body image and women's esteem around their appearance, like we were so worried about women comparing themselves to models and celebrities. That seems just quaint now. It's like I can't believe I worried about Cosmo and Vogue. I can't believe I thought that was the problem because what you have
Sorry, I don't
now.
mean to laugh, but
Well,
like,
it's true, right? Now we have this whole generation of young women. They're not just wanting to look like someone famous, they're wanting to look like a version of themselves that doesn't exist. And I can't imagine anything more crushing, more alienating, right, than competing with what is essentially a robot, an alien. And you're saying, I want to look like that. I want to look not human.
mhm.
Right? We need to emphasize our humanity more, not less.
It's, I'm because obviously like we all are susceptible to this, right? And
Hmm.
I'll give you an example. I've been obsessing on like jaw lines, right? Like there's all this talk about like jawline and face yoga. I've never even heard of this stuff. So I started looking at my jawline and I was like, ooh, I
Hard.
jowly
Yeah.
things when I'm old. Well, guess what? I looked at pictures of myself when I was in my 30s. I'm like, no, that's just my face. Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, everything you click on, every algorithm, every ad is meant to make you feel awful. It's meant to tickle a vulnerability, to start like stoking that vulnerability until you become convinced that you need a product or a procedure, something expensive that can fix it. That's this is how marketing works, and it's like we know it, but we don't know it, right? We know it, but we want to believe that we still have power over it. I talk to so many women who say, like, well, I just choose to ignore that stuff. And I say, we don't have that choice. You don't get to live in a culture and not be shaped by it. We are all shaped by this culture. We're swimming in it. And it creates this scene where, I've had people say, well, you can't talk about this because you wear lipstick. And I think, what? I can't live in this world and still see the ways that I want it to be changed. I I think we all have to still sort of play by the rules of the game, even if at the same time we're saying, I don't like these rules. These rules aren't fair. We can't just opt out entirely. I mean, this, you're in journalism. You
Yeah.
cannot opt out entirely without significant penalties.
Well, you were talking about the whole the social media aspect, and you discussed this in your fantastic TEDx, which everybody should watch. The arm thing, right?
The
And
arms.
no, I do it
It's
too.
this. It's yeah. There you
Yes.
go. Still tiny camera.
Yeah,
Skinny,
and
skinny
I have
arm.
to tell
Yeah.
you, I direct documentaries, and a friend of mine was saying, "Well, now you get to do the director pose, not the actress pose." And I said, "What's
What's
that?"
that?
"Oh, I'll show you." So, because the actress is that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Director is this. I
Oh.
was like, "Oh, this would be so much fun." But I was like, "How did we get to the point that that?"
Yeah.
It's a switch. How did this? Because this wasn't going on in the 90s.
Mm-mm.
Everyone's so fond of
I know. I try to
it.
tell my students about what they love hearing. They love hearing about the 90s. It was like, might as well have been a century ago. And I talked to them about how we definitely had cameras, but you had to go get the film developed, right?
Right.
This wasn't digital. And that meant whatever shot you took, that's what you got. So there was none of this edit, retake, edit, retake. And we just looked like people in the shots, because when you're not having your picture taken over and over and over again, we didn't think about things like skinny arm, or whether, like, the thing a lot of women do now where they immediately arch their back when they have a picture taken, like this whole, like, arch your back, hand, face down, eyes
Maybe I'll
up,
arch my
close
back
it.
right now. I'm
Like,
like,
there are all these rules. Those rules aren't supposed to be for regular people, right? Those rules are for people who model for a living. But now it's so widespread that you have just your average 12-year-old knows how to do this, like, knows how to pose the minute a camera comes out. And the camera's always coming out. It's always coming out. I call it in my book, it's paparazzi. It's basically your average young woman now lives like she's being trailed by the paparazzi. And sometimes she does it to herself. And sometimes it's her friends, and sometimes it's strangers. It's a really strange world. That everyone's got a camera out, everyone's documenting everyone at all times. It's hard not to be obsessed with how you look if you never know what's going to end up on social media. It's not easy.
yeah, I don't know if you ever watch honest movie trailers. Do you watch that at all? They're so
Mhm.
fun. But it's found on YouTube. Honest movie trailers. It's Screen Junkies does it. But anyway, they had one for
Mhm.
Ghostbusters, and they had the original Ghostbusters, and it's Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, and Bill Murray. And the guy doing the voiceover goes, "Yes, kids, this is what movie stars looked like in the 1980s." And
Well, it's what male movie
male
stars
movie
look
stars,
like
right?
in the
But
1950s.
still, I mean, it was a very even for the.
Mhm.
I mean, think about some of the actresses we grew up looking at, and it really has, changed
Yeah.
in the last.
Yeah, it's a trickle down effect, right? Things that used to be, I think, and still are very difficult for celebrities. I think it's hard. It's hard to, feel too much sympathy when you're making millions of dollars a year. But still, I feel some, right? But it's something that a small group of people had to contend with, and now it's trickled down. So it trickled down to, young women, or middle-aged women, and now it's trickled down to 12-year-olds and maybe 8 or 9-year-olds. And I do think we have to look at the gender component of this, right? The 8, 9, 10-year-old boys are not going to Sephora, right, and asking, like, what can I do to fix my skin? Like, right? They're not. What are they doing instead? Right? Now? Maybe they're just playing video games. I don't know. But what are they doing instead? I used to spend a lot of time worrying about what girls and young women were seeing on social media, and it's not that I don't worry about that. Still, I do. I have a lot of things to worry about. It's a long list, but what I think about a lot more now is what could they be doing instead? Like, what are they not doing because they did 2 hours of YouTube makeup tutorials? Is that is that really how you wanted to spend your time? Maybe, right? Maybe sometimes, but will you look back in a year and think, yep, time well spent, right? All the time I spent on that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's the case.
Well, one thing that's I obviously have established I don't have children, but I do have nieces and I have a nephew, and I have a lot of young people in my life. And the thing that I've really struck me, especially post COVID, is that algorithm. And a lot's been written about it, especially with the Instagram and also TikTok. But TikTok actually monitors it a little bit better. But this fact that that algorithm, especially with Instagram, hypersexualizes young women and rewards them for and you know there's a whole canon about how pedophiles find them, et cetera, et cetera. And it's been so destructive, and I'm sure that your research shows this. What what's the way out, I guess I would ask you, like how do we?
Is complicated, and I just always wish I had some great answer to that. It's like I get a lot of journalists who say, "But don't you think things are getting better now because of body positivity?" I'm like, no, what better?
Let's
No.
show you those eating disorder wards at the hospital,
No.
you know.
I think we need 1,000 small changes to just start pulling back. And the truth is, there are whole industries that are devoted to making girls and women uncomfortable with how they look, to making them feel like they need to sexualize in order to be successful. It's hard to feel like you have a lot of power in the face of that. And so I think what we need is a movement that's more from the ground up, which is we need to start creating deliberate communities where especially young girls have this space where their picture is not being taken, where people aren't talking about how cute they are, where they're not messing with their makeup, where they're just doing something else they might enjoy, right? Where they're getting space to grow. Like there's, people like to be sexual objects, right? That's on occasion. I think like it's okay to be honest about that. There are settings, there are spaces where an adult can feel like that's nice, that's powerful, that's sexy. And so I have people say, well, what's so wrong with that? It's not something 10-year-old girls should have to be worried about, or
Yeah.
12-year-olds, or 14-year-olds, right? We need to give our girls space to grow up as much as they can, right? Before they're flooded with that imagery, with those messages, with those demands, right? Let them build a stronger base, a stronger core sense of who they are. And then maybe they can be more effective at fighting back. That's my hope, but it's slow and it's difficult to get there, I think.
Well, you in your lecture, your TEDx, you talked about this no makeup look, and it made me think of a friend of mine who she sells wine. She's got her own distribution company out of Texas, and New York, and she said that her sales increased the less makeup she wore. And then so I was thinking about that, and then also this phenomenon of Pam Anderson, who 1990s Pam Anderson, since we're talking about it, was wearing a lot of makeup. New Pam Anderson, if you saw the last Showgirl, is not really wearing a lot of makeup, except for when and she's been very public about not wearing makeup on the red carpet. But what you say is like, not so fast.
Yeah. First, I mean, we should recognize that we don't get to be in charge of these rules, right? So we sort of pretend that we are like, but who gets to decide when is it okay to wear makeup, but when should you not wear makeup, but when are you not wearing enough? One of my young one in my classes was talking to me about birthday makeup. Have you heard of this? I have
No.
not either.
Oh
And
my
she's like,
God.
oh, she said, but men hate birthday makeup. I was like, what? Birthday makeup is when you're going out for your birthday. And so you put on a lot of makeup because you want to look special. But the thing is, men don't really like it. They don't want that much makeup. But they also don't want you to wear no makeup because then they'll say things like, are you tired? Are you sick? You look weird, right?
You look weird.
And so like the very idea that we're even having to consider this, like that this is even a conversation, I think is telling. Like this is not, we should be able to wear however much makeup we want to wear or not wear. But are there consequences? Yes. But who's benefiting from the fact that we can never predict what those consequences are? Right? Like, oh, now you've worn slightly too much. We don't like that. Oh, now you didn't wear enough. You're looking a little old. You look like haggard. You let yourself go, right? How are we supposed to figure that out? We're not in charge of that. All it takes is one person to criticize your choice and you feel like, oh, now I don't know the rules again. Like what were those rules? This is a game we don't get to control. I think the only thing we can do is try to stop playing whenever we can.
Yeah.
When it's reasonable, when it's possible, just don't play.
I was
I
just
didn't
thinking
sign
about,
up for this.
as you were talking about what are the rules, a friend of mine who's a makeup artist in LA, she's great at her job. We were hanging out and I said, well, what do you do as you get older? And she's like, less. And I was like, really? So as we get older, and I thought that is such a freaking cool thing. Like, because they're like, because your skin changes. And I thought, well, that's if that's what a top makeup artist is saying, that's, think about how much more money I have to spend on coffee.
I mean, that sounds nice. Yeah. I noticed when I was doing publicity for my book, this really ironic thing was happening. So I'm going on TV, which is not, let me just say, I had no idea what I was doing. I was not very good at it. And I didn't know like how things work. And I'm coming into these studios to talk about a book that says, hey, it's really not great how much we focus on women's appearance. It's really not great. And then the minute I would walk in, I heard everything from like, oh my God, your skin is so red. That's awful. We need to do something about that. Like that was literally the first thing someone said to me one time at like a local news channel. Or I actually got told, oh, your forehead's way too big for no bangs. Way too big. And it was just so telling to me that it's like, even when you're coming in to talk about, why we shouldn't do this, why it has such negative consequences, it's the way we relate, right? That we see a woman and we're like, let's say something about how she looks. It's really hard to shut that off, I think.
Well, one of the things that you have talked about is you recommend reframing in terms of what your body can do for you, which I thought was a fascinating way to go about this. Because as you get older, of course, you're like, what? Why does that hurt?
Everything hurts. Yes.
I didn't even know that was a thing. But that was such an interesting consideration. And you've also talked, you've woven this into our discussion when you talk about how certain clothing articles or shoes mean that you can't run fast or you can't do certain things physically. So going back to that idea of what your body can do for you.
Yeah, I think sometimes when I say that, people like I'll have young people will say, well, that's ableist. And I said, no, it's not. It's not. Because when I say what your body can do for you, I don't mean it that you have to like run marathons, right? I don't mean that. I think that the more we only focus on how our body looks, the more we lose touch with how it feels and what it does for us each day. So when I say what your body does for you, I include things like, hug the people you love, or does it allow you to play the piano or make art? Right? Is your body is what mediates, right, between you and the world. And it's a strange thing we've done where we've put so many women in a position where they hate that part of themselves, where they hate their body, where they see it as their enemy or something that just needs to be, tamed into submission. This is your way of connecting with other people. You can't do that without your body. I think there's room for us to give our bodies a little more compassion. I think that can be really helpful as a reframe.
I like how what you just said in terms of give our bodies compassion. Compassion is, we could probably all use a little bit of that.
Yeah, we all need some. Yeah.
Yeah, but the idea of, there's a lot of, the other phenomenon going on is like, self-care and self-love.
Sorry, I can't even hear self-care without laughing.
Me either.
The self-care industry has
time to have self-care. I'm like, go ahead. I've got to hear your take on this. I want to hear it. Do it.
There's two things wrong about self-care. One is that what gets sold as self-care is almost entirely about changing the way you look and buying things, right? What our bodies most need from us is probably sleep, exercise, and if we're lucky, like some decent nutrition, right? Or some stress management. Self-care should not involve an $800 bill at Sephora. I mean, I don't buy it. If you want to do it, fine, but it's not self-care. The original idea behind self-care, it came really from psychology spaces. And the idea was that you had to be able to meet your own basic needs so that you could care for others, right? So that you could be sturdy enough, right? And be ready to help when help is needed. I look around and I see a lot of help that's needed right now. Whereas I see self-care, at least in online spaces, has turned into something that is so like, oh, this is, people are not going to like this. It's turned narcissistic, right? It's turned into something where you say, what matters more than anything is me, how I feel, what I want, what I need, right? I think we really lose a piece of ourselves when we say that. We've lost sight of the fact that sometimes the best way to care for ourselves is to be in community with other people, to help others, to serve others, to connect with others. A 12-step skincare routine, it doesn't change the world, and it does not actually do anything for mental health. I feel like, do I have the data to say that? No, I feel okay saying it anyway. The way we feel better is by acting in ways that are aligned with our values. And a lot of what passes for self-care has nothing to do with our values. It has nothing to do with what matters to us and what we really care about. If you want to feel better, do more of those things and also take a nap. That's my advice.
I mean, honestly, that is, I think that is extremely powerful what you just said, because it's a reminder. I mean, we hear these things over and over and over again. There's so much empirical evidence out there and anecdotal that the thing that makes us feel better is this idea of community and interaction, and the fact that we've kind of, because of technology, especially with kids today, they don't have as much of it. Like, I get, I can't believe we're talking about the 1990s so much, but it reminds me of one of my interns saying to me, what were the 90s like? Were they as good as I think they were? And I was like, I was about to refute it. Then I was like, actually, they were awesome.
I have to say, like, there were not always great things going on, but I'm so grateful in many ways that I got to grow up when I did. I don't think I would be who I am today if I had grown up with a smartphone and social media. I don't even know who I'd be. I got a message from I think a girl, maybe like 12, 13 years old recently, who said, I saw your talk online and I want to be a public speaker for a living. What do I need to do to become a public speaker? And I was like, what do you mean you want to become a public speaker? Like, even that was so symptomatic of our culture. It wasn't, I want to talk about this. I want to communicate about this. I want to make a difference in this domain or in this field. It was literally like, I just want people listening to me and looking at me. And so I think she probably didn't like my response, which was, what you need is deep expertise and passion about that area of expertise. So take at least a decade and build it and then talk about it.
I mean,
right?
I like the language that you're using, because what you're talking about is foundational, and that the power starts there. And then, it reminds me of the fact that there are so many people who will say that their goal is to be an influencer.
I know. I hear that and I think, what kind of influence are you wanting to have? Like, it's in the title. Influence. I think people say that, and what they mean is, I want to make money for being cute and not looking very hard, working very hard and getting lots of attention, maybe. But when we say influencer, we're implying that you have some kind of influence. What kind of influence do you want to have, right? What kind of person do you want to be? I'm convinced we don't ask young people these questions enough. What does that mean? If you're an influencer, you're selling. What are you selling? Oh, you're selling yourself? What is it about yourself that you're selling? Is it your expertise? Is it just how you look? Like, what is it? I don't know. It's hard. It's sad. I think we are really taking growth opportunities away from young people when we put them in these environments that say what you need for success and happiness is to look a certain way. Mm-hmm. And we're also ignoring the fact that we say, oh, anyone can do it, right, with the right tricks. But that's not how it works. Our standards around appearance, they're ageist, of course. They're classist, like we talk about, but they're also racist, right? This is not an open door that anyone can walk through. I wish that we were opening other doors more for young people.
That's an interesting thought that you just put out there. This is not an open door that just anyone can walk through. Because there you and you have spoken about this. There is a beauty ideal, and that is what?
I mean, maybe there's not one, but there's one that dominates. And the one that dominates is young and thin and white and wealthy, right? That is the ideal. And you can't Sephora your way into that, right? Those are power structures that have been in place for a long time. And I think we sort of kid ourselves when we think that we've moved beyond that. There's been a lot of research looking at body positivity online, which always sounds like a good thing, right? On the surface, it does. But a lot of accounts that label themselves as body positivity, what it boils down to is another thin white woman saying, I love myself. I'm okay with how I look. And that's great. Hey, I'm a white lady. Like, I'm like, it's okay. But we're really missing something, right? When we narrow our focus in that way, we need to look at the bigger structures that are in play here. This is not, beauty is not a democratic process. We sell it as though if you just work hard enough, anyone can have it. That is not how it works. And we end up making a lot of people feel bad and making a lot of people sick when we pretend that that's what beauty is.
When you, I know in theory I should just leave it there because it was such a good note to end on. But but this idea of this is how we can make people sick. It makes me think of that anecdote in your book. I have a note on this because it was so sad. The swimmer, he was a really good swimmer.
Mm-hmm.
And she wanted to be thin though. And what happened was she became not as good of a swimmer anymore and couldn't figure out that she was sacrificing actual strength and competence, by the way. Like, not everybody is born a gifted athlete, right? And she sacrificed that to look a certain way.
It's a lot we're asking of people. I teach a course on the psychology of human beauty, and I love this course. It lets me talk about some very interesting topics with a really engaged group of students. But I've tried to really push them on some topics, in the last few years, and one of them is anti-fat bias, because there's still, now Ozempic is clouding the waters a little bit, but there's still this sense that a lot of my students have that, like, if you just eat less and exercise more, you'll be thin and everyone should be thin. And like, that is just sort of their take on it. And one of the things I talk to them about is what it means to diet for the rest of your life. Is what are we asking of people when we're saying, for you to have space in this world, right? For you to be respected, you need to be a little bit hungry for the rest of your life, right? That's a big deal, right? When we're hungry, we can't focus, we get cranky, we all sort of know this. But it's easy to just sort of sweep that aside and say, oh, well, everyone should just do this.
Yeah, it reminds me of that Tina Fey joke. I think she and Amy Poehler at the Golden Globes one year were talking about, like, yeah, this is just being an actress. It's like, I had to starve myself for 3 weeks, or like, and the guy, the actor didn't have to do it. Yeah, I mean,
and we all say, ha ha ha, right?
Yeah,
right? As though starvation is funny. Yeah.
Yeah. And what made me so sad about that swimmer is that, Title IX, which was such an important piece of legislation to get us here. I mean, there's a direct correlation between girls who do sports become women in the C-suite, right? And the fact is, like, here we are a couple generations into this idea of strength, physical strength for women, but we're not that far ahead.
Not that far. I mean, she still had coaches who couldn't figure out why she was getting weak, right? She still had people telling her to limit her calories, right? So it's a sign, right, that, again, that we're not thinking of women's bodies as things that do, right, but rather as things that we look at and evaluate. So, one step forward, two steps back. I don't know where we are now. To be two forward, one back, hard to say.
And what would you, and I'll end it on an inclusive note. What would you say to guys who are fathers or brothers and friends, and but who want to be allies, who want to do something constructive to be helpful? What advice do you have?
So I think often what allies try to do is just tell people they're beautiful all the time. right? Just say, oh, you look great, you both look great, you look wonderful, you look awesome, you're beautiful, I love you just the way, like, and I think that's sweet, right? But that's not really what we need. What we need is less focus on how girls and women look. So one of the best things you can do, for example, if you have daughters or sons or kids of any gender, really, right? One of the best things you can do is just try to open as many doors as you can in their lives to things that they might think about, be interested in, that aren't about appearance, right? What I really want us to do is give both kids and adults more places to be where you don't feel like you're performing, right? Where you feel like you can just relax, right? You can be open, you can be honest, you can wear clothing that doesn't hurt. When you're in that space, that's when you really connect and really grow. And so the more of those spaces you can offer the people in your life, I think the better off we'll all be.
I love that. I think that that's really, really wise. And, I'm going to reapply my lip gloss because we are talking about appearances, and I've been having coffee this whole time, so we could talk for hours and hours and hours. And but I thank you so much for doing this, and I can't wait to see this new research that you've done on this.
Can't wait.
Renee, Michelle, thank you so much for sharing your insightful and really important conversation. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us here at the Forum. And thanks to all of you in the audience for joining us at the Forum today, too. You can find Renee's book, Beauty Sick, How the Cultural Obsession with Appearance Hurts Girls and Women, at bookstores everywhere. This program, as well as other archived interviews and information about upcoming presentations, can be found at our website, shforum.org. And finally, as we say goodbye, we'd like to thank the following people for their generosity in making the St. Helena Forum and its continuing programs possible.